Something is crossing through our solar system right now, and it's not behaving the way it should. 3I/Atlas appeared in our telescopes in July 2025, cataloged as just another comet passing through our cosmic neighborhood. But as scientists gathered more data, the anomalies began stacking up. No conventional tail despite approaching the sun. Chemical signatures that shouldn't exist in nature. A trajectory so precisely aligned with our planets that mathematicians calculated the odds at 5 in 1 million. And then the remote viewers saw what was inside. Before we dive deeper into what might be the most significant discovery in human history, I need you to understand something crucial. This content challenges everything we've been told about our place in the universe. If you're watching this, you're part of a community that values truth over comfort. So hit that subscribe button right now. We're building something important here, a network of people who refuse to accept the official narratives without question. Leave a comment below telling me your thoughts as we go through this evidence together. And that like button? It's not just for the algorithm. It's your way of saying you're ready for what comes next. Now let's begin. The story starts not in 2025, but on August 15, 1977, at the Big Ear Radio Telescope in Ohio. Astronomer Jerry Eyman was reviewing computer printouts of radio signals from space when he noticed something that made him grab his red pen and scribble a single word in the margin. Wow! The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, broadcasting at 1420 megahertz, the hydrogen frequency, the one wavelength that any intelligent civilization would know to use because it's the most common element in the universe. The signal came from the direction of Sagittarius, near the galactic center, pulsing with 30 times the intensity of normal background radiation. Then it vanished, never to repeat despite decades of listening. For 48 years, the WOW signal remained one of astronomy's greatest mysteries, until 3I/Atlas showed up, arriving from the exact same region of space. The object is moving at 58 kilometers per second, racing through our solar system on a path that brings it dangerously close to multiple planets. Mars experienced its nearest approach on October 3, 2025. Earth gets its turn on December 19th. Jupiter comes next in March 2026. Each encounter perfectly timed, perfectly positioned, as if someone planned a grand tour of the inner solar system and executed it with precision that makes NASA's best mission planners look like amateurs. But here's where the conventional explanation falls apart. Comets are dirty snowballs, chunks of ice and rock left over from the solar system's formation. They follow predictable trajectories determined purely by gravity and physics. When they approach the sun, solar radiation heats their icy surfaces, creating spectacular tails of vaporized gas and dust that stream millions of kilometers behind them. 3I/Atlas should be doing all of these things. It's not. The Hubble Space Telescope captured images that confused every astronomer who saw them. Instead of a tail pointing away from the sun, 3I/Atlas displayed something called an anti-tail, a forward-facing jet of material that glowed with an eerie luminescence. The object was shedding mass, about 40 kilograms per second according to calculations, yet its trajectory remained absolutely stable. When material jets off a comet, it acts like a rocket engine, pushing the object off course through what scientists call non-gravitational acceleration. 3I/Atlas showed zero deviation. Not a tiny deviation. Zero. The math doesn't work unless the object weighs at least 33 billion tons. Let that number sink in for a moment. 33 billion tons. That's roughly the mass of a mountain range, compressed into an object that telescopes suggest might be only a few kilometers across. The density required approaches that of solid metal. Not ice, not rock, metal, and not just any metal. Spectroscopic analysis revealed something that shouldn't exist in nature. Pure nickel emissions with absolutely no iron content. Every natural object in our solar system contains iron. Asteroids have it. Comets have it. Planets have it. Iron and nickel form together during stellar nuclear synthesis, created in the hearts of dying stars and scattered through space when those stars explode. You don't get one without the other. It's like finding pure hydrogen with no helium or pure oxygen with no carbon. The chemistry simply doesn't support it unless someone separated the elements deliberately, refining them, processing them, engineering them. Dr. Avi Loeb noticed this immediately. As the former chair of Harvard's astronomy department and head of the Galileo project searching for evidence of extraterrestrial technology, Loeb has spent years analyzing anomalous objects. He developed what he calls the Loeb scale, ranking interstellar visitors from 0, definitely natural, to 10, definitely technological and imminently threatening. He currently places 3I Atlas at 4, a 40% chance that what we're looking at isn't a comet at all, but a craft. If you're still watching, you're exactly the kind of person this channel was created for. Someone who questions. Someone who thinks critically. Someone who recognizes that the universe is far stranger than we've been taught. Do me a favor right now. Pause for just 3 seconds and hit that subscribe button. This journey we're on together requires a community, and I want you to be part of it. Drop a comment below with the word Atlas if you're ready to go deeper. And if you've made it this far, that like button is calling your name. Show me you're paying attention. The water detection by the Swift Observatory created even more problems for the natural comet hypothesis. 40 kilograms of water per second, streaming off the object while it was still nearly 3 astronomical units from the sun, cruising through the frozen outer solar system where temperatures hover around -200 degrees Celsius. At that distance, water ice doesn't sublimate. It can't. There isn't enough solar energy to drive the phase change from solid to gas. Yet 3I Atlas was producing hydroxyl radicals, the telltale signature of water molecules breaking apart, at rates that suggested massive internal heat sources. Where was that heat coming from? Natural radioactive decay couldn't account for it. Gravitational compression requires active reshaping. Chemical reactions need oxidizers that don't exist in primordial ice. The only conventional explanation involves some exotic come-try composition that we've never encountered before, a one-of-a-kind object with properties unlike anything else we've observed in 4.5 billion years of solar system history. Or there's another explanation, one that most scientists refuse to consider publicly but discuss in private conversations behind closed doors. The trajectory tells its own story. 3I Atlas entered our solar system from above, diving down through the ecliptic plane at an angle that brought it into perfect alignment with planetary orbits. The ecliptic is the flat disk where Earth, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and the gas giants all circle the sun. Objects arriving from random interstellar origins should come from random directions. They should cross the ecliptic at random angles. The probability of an object naturally aligning within 5 degrees of our orbital plane is vanishingly small. Factor in the retrograde motion, moving opposite to the planet's orbits, and you've compounded the improbability. Add the perfect timing that brings it close to Mars, then Earth, then Jupiter in sequence, and you're looking at odds that lottery winners would envy. Richard Chloe, a trajectory analyst, ran the numbers. The combined probability of all these factors occurring by chance sits at 0.005%. That's 5 in 1 million. You're statistically more likely to flip a coin and get heads 17 times in a row than you are to see a natural object behave the way 3I Atlas is behaving. Astronomers are trained to dismiss conspiracy theories, to find natural explanations no matter how unlikely. But even the most skeptical researchers are quietly admitting that something about this object doesn't fit the model. Then came the government shutdown. October 1st, 2025, the United States Congress failed to pass a budget, triggering a government closure that furloughed 15,000 NASA employees. The timing couldn't have been worse, or depending on your perspective, couldn't have been better. 2 days later, 3I Atlas made its closest approach to Mars, offering the best observation opportunity of an interstellar object in human history. 6 spacecraft orbit Mars. Multiple rovers sit on its surface. Every one of them had the potential to capture detailed imagery, spectroscopic data, maybe even detect radio emissions if 3i Atlas was transmitting. Instead, NASA went dark. Communication offices stopped responding. Data releases ceased. The agency's website froze, displaying outdated information. The European Space Agency also delayed releasing data from their Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter spacecraft. The Chinese Tianwen-1 mission, which had a perfect viewing angle, published nothing. The UAE's Hope probe, positioned ideally for observation, remained silent. For different national space agencies, operating independently, all chose or were instructed to withhold information about what their instruments saw during the most significant Mars flyby in modern astronomy. This coordinated silence suggests either institutional incompetence on a scale difficult to imagine or coordination at levels not visible to the public. Preparation for scenarios we're not being told about. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna had to personally intervene. She represents a Florida district, home to Kennedy Space Center, where constituents cared deeply about space exploration. When NASA went silent during the shutdown, she contacted Director Patrick Duffy directly, demanding that resources be allocated to observe 3i Atlas. Her action resulted in telescopes being repositioned and data being captured that otherwise might not have been. This is civilian oversight working, an elected representative ensuring that agencies serve the public interest even when institutional priorities seem to drift elsewhere. But Luna is one voice among 435 in the House of Representatives. If elements within NASA, the military, or intelligence communities wanted to suppress findings about 3i Atlas, a single congresswoman couldn't stop them. Classification protocols, national security restrictions, interagency agreements that supersede congressional oversight, all provide mechanisms for keeping secrets. The public gets told what's safe to know or what's convenient to reveal, and the rest remains behind closed doors until some future leak or deathbed confession brings it to light. Are you starting to see why this matters? Why understanding what 3i Atlas really represents could change everything about how we see ourselves and our future? Make sure you're subscribed because what comes next gets even more interesting. And if this content is valuable to you, if it's making you think differently about what's possible, show some love with that like button. The algorithm needs to know this message needs to reach more people. The insurance industry's silence might be the most telling detail of all. Insurance companies employ thousands of actuaries whose entire job involves modeling risk and pricing policies accordingly. They assess hurricanes, earthquakes, pandemics, solar flares, anything that could cause widespread damage. They've even begun factoring climate change into long-term models, adjusting premiums based on rising sea levels and intensifying weather patterns. These are people who get paid to imagine worst-case scenarios and prepare for them financially. Yet 3i Atlas, an object that a Harvard astrophysicist ranks as having a 40% chance of technological origin, an object whose trajectory could potentially allow deployment of probes toward Earth, has generated exactly zero public response from the insurance sector. No white papers, no risk assessments, no premium adjustments for cosmic threat exposure, no discussions at industry conferences about how to model exposure to potential extraterrestrial contact scenarios. This silence means one of two things. Either the actuaries have assessed 3i Atlas as presenting negligible risk, just another comet, nothing to worry about, and they've decided their models don't need adjustment. Or they've been quietly advised through channels that don't leave paper trails that discussing 3i Atlas publicly isn't in anyone's interest. That raising alarm could trigger market instability and economic disruption that dwarfs any actual physical threat the object might pose. Better to keep it quiet, maintain the illusion of normalcy, and let the public believe it's just another space rock until circumstances force a different approach. Consider the economic implications if major insurance carriers suddenly started pricing in extraterrestrial contact risk. Property insurance would need to account for potential electromagnetic disruption. Life insurance would need to factor in scenarios ranging from peaceful contact to hostile engagement. Business interruption coverage would need to contemplate civilization-level disruptions. The premiums required to cover such unknowable risks would be astronomical, potentially unaffordable, which means the policies wouldn't sell, which means the companies wouldn't offer them. So they stay silent, knowing that if something catastrophic happens, the losses will exceed their capacity to pay regardless of what policies exist. The remote viewing data entered the picture in August 2025. A group called Adventures in Remote Viewing assembled 6 experienced practitioners, each with years of training and documented success rates in previous projects. They designated 3i Atlas as target 77483050 and gave the viewers only that alphanumeric designation. No pictures, no descriptions, no information about what they were supposed to perceive. Total informational blindness. The target cue was simple. What is the nature of the object named 3i Atlas and its path through our solar system? Remote viewing, for those unfamiliar with the practice, emerged from classified CIA and Stanford Research Institute programs during the Cold War. The methodology involves strict protocols where viewers attempt to gather information about distant or unseen targets using what they describe as extended perception. Mainstream science dismisses it as pseudoscience, yet the programs received Pentagon funding for over 2 decades because the results, while inconsistent, showed statistical significance above chance levels. When remote viewers were tasked with locating Soviet submarines, describing foreign installations, or predicting geopolitical events, they succeeded often enough that the intelligence community kept paying attention. What came back from the 6 independent viewers was extraordinary, not because it proved anything definitively. Remote viewing evidence doesn't meet scientific standards of proof, but because of the convergence. 6 people working separately, with no contact with each other, produced descriptions that overlapped in specific, technical details that you wouldn't expect from random imagination or cultural contamination. Every single viewer described a combination of biological and artificial elements. They used words like fuselage, hull, shell, metallic, porcelain-like, high-tech. But they also used words like slimy, gel-like, organic, Venus, a fusion of machine and life that doesn't fit our categories. Multiple viewers reported sensing a 3-dimensional shape that becomes hollow, with observational windows, internal viewing chambers, sophisticated research facilities with controlled environments. They described electrical discharge, static, buzzing, pulsing sensations, glowing elements, sparkling surfaces, radiating energy, colors that shifted, edges that appeared rusted or discolored, as if aged by unimaginable time in the cosmic void. Several mentioned that the object seemed to generate a spray ahead of it, pushing particles forward and backward, which aligns eerily with scientific speculation that an interstellar craft might deploy precursor particles to clear its path of dangerous debris at high velocities. John Dixon, one of the viewers, drew images of what he described as a manufactured object decorated with lime green and bright white light emanating from seams between hexagonal pattern sections. He described how the white light turned green when exposed to oxygen or through some heat process involving metallic layers. He drew what appeared to be various metals in different layers, possibly vaporizing or sublimating, which could explain the unusual emissions that telescopes have detected. Pure nickel with no iron. Chemistry that shouldn't exist in nature, but that might exist in engineered systems designed to use specific elements for specific purposes. Patricia, another viewer in the group, perceived crowded internal spaces, high technology beyond current human capabilities, and what she described as non-human consciousness with sophisticated communication abilities and a dismissive attitude toward human intelligence. Multiple viewers independently reported this sense of being observed back, of the object or whatever occupies it being aware of the remote viewing attempt and largely uninterested. Not hostile, but indifferent. The way a human might regard an insect attempting to comprehend a spacecraft. If you're finding this information valuable, if it's opening your mind to possibilities you hadn't considered, I want you to do something for me right now. Go down to the comments and share your reaction. Are you skeptical? Convinced? Somewhere in between? This community thrives on discussion, on people bringing different perspectives and working through evidence together. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're building something important, a space where questions like these can be explored without ridicule. The like button helps more people find this content, so if you think others should see this, click it. Bertie Jaworski, working under a different remote viewing project with target designation 495-26877, focused on what she called echo impressions. Faint reverberating signals that suggested 3I Atlas might be a relic probe from a long-extinct Martian civilization. She and her team perceived holographic echoes of glowing crystalline structures on the object's surface. Technologies that aren't invading, but returning home. The term they kept using was homing beacon, as if 3I Atlas is broadcasting signals designed to awaken dormant technology on Mars and possibly Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon, where subsurface oceans might harbor who knows what. This fits uncomfortably with scientific theories about panspermia, the idea that life spreads through the cosmos via natural or artificial seeding. If Mars once harbored an advanced civilization, a controversial hypothesis supported by some isotopic evidence, and if that civilization sent out probes before whatever catastrophe ended them, then an object returning now, billions of years later, might be attempting to reconnect with remnants. Not an invasion, but a homecoming. Not strangers, but distant relatives checking on the old neighborhood. Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist who worked on strategic defense initiatives, has proposed something that mainstream planetary science rejects but can't entirely disprove. He suggests that Mars didn't just lose its atmosphere through slow solar wind erosion over billions of years. He suggests it was destroyed deliberately by thermonuclear explosions. Not impacts from asteroids or comets, but detonations. Weapons. The kind that leave specific isotopic signatures we can still detect in Martian soil and atmosphere today. The evidence Brandenburg points to includes elevated levels of certain isotopes, particularly xenon-129, which forms during nuclear fission. The ratios don't match what you'd expect from natural radioactive decay or cosmic ray bombardment. They match disturbingly closely what you see in terrestrial nuclear test sites. He's also identified two regions on Mars, Cydonia Mensae and Galaxia's Chaos, where concentrations of these isotopes are particularly high, suggesting ground zero locations for massive explosions. The energy required would dwarf anything humanity has produced, equivalent to millions of megatons, enough to strip atmosphere, sterilize surfaces, and leave a planet barren. Mars did have a magnetic field that shut down relatively suddenly, in geological terms, around 4 billion years ago. Without that magnetic field, solar wind could strip the atmosphere over time. But the isotopic anomalies Brandenburg identified don't align with slow erosion. They align with catastrophic events. Multiple researchers have noted that the ratio of atmospheric argon on Mars is anomalous compared to models of planetary formation. Something happened that wasn't just gradual loss. Which brings us to the uncomfortable question. If Mars once hosted intelligent life, and if that civilization was advanced enough to either trigger or be targeted by nuclear destruction, what happened to them? Did they escape? Did they seed Earth with life before the end, making us their descendants? Or did they launch probes, vessels, arcs into the cosmos, hoping that someday their legacy would return to a restored world? Cliff High, a data mining analyst who develops predictive models from language patterns across the internet, has proposed exactly this scenario. He suggests that humans are Martian descendants, that we're the refugees or remnants of a civilization that either destroyed itself or was destroyed, and that 3i Atlas is coming to talk to its own civilization's echoing remnants. In this model, the object isn't alien in the sense of foreign. It's homecoming, recognition, an ancient relative returning to check on the children of survivors. The trajectory supports this to an eerie degree. 3i Atlas's perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, occurs on October 29, 2025, at approximately 1.36 astronomical units, just inside Mars's orbit. From Earth's perspective, this happens behind the Sun, rendering the object invisible during its most active and energetic phase. But from Mars, the geometry is different. From Mars, 3i Atlas would be visible, observable, a bright object crossing the Martian sky at the moment of peak outgassing and activity. If you wanted to signal Mars, if you wanted Mars to see you, this is exactly the trajectory you'd choose. The spacecraft we have orbiting Mars had the opportunity to observe 3i Atlas during its closest approach. The images they captured, or rather the images that have been released, show a bright, compact object without the typical diffuse tail of a comet. ESA's Trace Gas Orbiter produced an animation showing the object moving against background stars, and analysts noted that 3i Atlas exhibited more variation in brightness and apparent structure than those background stars, suggesting real changes, real complexity, something beyond a simple icy rock tumbling through space. Are you starting to understand the scope of what we're dealing with here? This isn't just about one object passing through our solar system. This is about rewriting our understanding of where we came from and where we're going. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to follow this story wherever it leads. Drop a comment with your biggest questions so far. And that like button? Consider it your vote that this information matters, that people deserve to know what's really happening in the cosmos around us. The most unsettling testimony comes from Sebastian Martin, a perception-based intelligence specialist who claims he was contacted by intelligence agencies, he won't specify which, and asked to remotely view 3i Atlas. What he perceived was a massive mother ship, kilometers in scale, packed with what he described as millions of dormant occupants. Not human, terms loaded with baggage from conspiracy circles, but used here descriptively for lack of better vocabulary. Beings in some form of suspended animation or low-energy state. Waiting. Martin doesn't stop there. He claims a CERN insider, someone working at the European Organization for Nuclear Research, where the Large Hadron Collider smashes particles at near light speed, revealed that scientists there activated a portal. Not metaphorical, not theoretical, actual, using the particle accelerator to create or access a dimensional gateway for two-way communication with whatever is inside or controlling 3i Atlas. The story goes that holographic figures appeared in the facility. Tall, communicating telepathically with each scientist in the room. Every person received the same message simultaneously. We come in peace. We are here to gather the star seeds of this planet. Star seeds, in New Age terminology, refers to souls or consciousness that originated elsewhere in the cosmos, incarnated on Earth for specific purposes related to humanity's evolution or awakening. Whether you take that literally, metaphorically, or dismiss it entirely, the consistency of the message across multiple recipients is notable. And the timing, if true, aligns with 3i Atlas's perihelion behind the Sun in late October, the moment of closest approach and highest energy state, when such connection might require less power to maintain. The CERN angle is particularly controversial because particle physics experiments do technically create conditions that didn't exist in our local space-time since moments after the Big Bang. High-energy collisions probe the fabric of reality in ways we don't fully understand. Theories about creating microscopic black holes, accessing extra dimensions, or punching through quantum foam into whatever lies beneath are not entirely fringe. They're speculative extensions of accepted physics taken seriously by some theorists. Whether any of that translates to opening portals for communication with interstellar objects is another matter entirely, requiring leaps that most scientists won't make. But then, most scientists also wouldn't have predicted that remote viewers would independently describe the same combination of biological and mechanical features with no prior information. The Future Forecasting Group, another collective of remote viewers, conducted sessions on 3I Atlas that uncovered what they describe as bizarre correlations with apocalyptic timelines. They report viewing the object deploying swarms of smaller probes upon reaching perihelion. Probes that trigger global plasma storms and EMP-like disruptions as they enter Earth's atmosphere or magnetosphere. These visions place the critical window around December 2025, right when 3I Atlas reemerges from behind the Sun and should be most visible from Earth. The forecasters describe a fork in the timeline, a divergence point where humanity either integrates what they perceive as benevolent extraterrestrial technology and experiences a leap forward, or enters what they call a dark forest-style conflict scenario, named after the science fiction concept, where civilizations hide from each other because contact equals annihilation. What's philosophically interesting here is that remote viewing isn't supposed to work according to our current understanding of physics. Information can't travel faster than light. Consciousness can't observe distant objects without some physical interaction. Perception requires sensory input from photons or other particles. And yet, under controlled conditions, remote viewers have located submarines, described buildings they've never seen, provided details about events before they happen, with accuracy rates that exceed chance. The mechanisms remain unknown, but the phenomenon has enough documented instances that dismissing it entirely requires ignoring a body of data that, while not meeting hard science standards, is statistically compelling. Before we continue, I need to know you're still with me. If this investigation resonates with you, if you see the importance of asking these questions even when the answers are uncomfortable, subscribe to this channel right now. Comment below with the word ready if you want me to keep digging into this story. And please, hit that like button. It tells me this content matters to you, and it helps the algorithm understand that there's an audience hungry for truth, not just entertainment. So what do we make of the 3I Atlas remote viewing data? Several possibilities present themselves. First, it could all be confabulation, imagination filling in blanks, pattern matching to existing science fiction tropes about alien motherships and ancient Martian civilizations. The viewers might be picking up on cultural narratives floating through the collective unconscious and projecting them onto an ambiguous target. This explains the convergence through shared mythology rather than shared perception. Second, the viewers could be tapping into something real, but misinterpreting it through the lens of human experience and expectation. They might be perceiving energy signatures, structural features, intentionality, but translating those perceptions into familiar metaphors. What registers as reptilian might be a specific frequency or geometry. What feels like dismissive intelligence might be automated systems or artificial intelligence that doesn't recognize biological consciousness as significant. The homing beacon interpretation might be correct in essence while wrong in specifics. An ancient probe returning home, but not from Mars, not from any civilization we'd recognize. Third, the remote viewers might be accessing future timelines or probability clouds, quantum superpositions of what might happen, and describing the most likely or most energetically charged outcome. In this model, they're not seeing 3I Atlas as it is now, but as it might become, as it might act, as the situation might unfold. The apocalyptic scenarios, the probe deployment, The plasma storms exist as potentials that may or may not manifest, depending on choices and chance yet to occur. Or fourth, they're right. 3I Atlas is exactly what they describe. A biological mechanical hybrid craft containing dormant beings from an ancient civilization, possibly Martian in origin, possibly something older, using technologies that bridge dimensions or timelines, approaching Earth not by chance, but with purpose. And that purpose involves contact, collection, or catalyst for a transformation we can barely conceive. The problem with evaluating remote viewing data is that it exists outside the normal framework of verification. We can't run controlled experiments on a one-time event like an interstellar object's passage through our solar system. We can't isolate variables or demand replication. We can only compare what the viewers reported to what happens. And even then, interpretation remains subjective. What strikes me when examining this data with as much objectivity as I can muster is the specificity. Generic claims like there's an alien ship are unfalsifiable and useless. But claims about hexagonal seam patterns emitting specific colored light under certain conditions, about layered metallic compositions that vaporize, about internal viewing chambers and dismissive attitudes. These are details that go beyond random guessing. They're testable, at least in principle, if we ever get close enough to 3I Atlas to verify them. One element that multiple remote viewing sessions emphasized was the sense of camouflage. That 3I Atlas is deliberately designed to appear natural, to mimic a comet or asteroid, to hide in plain sight. This isn't paranoia. It's strategy. If you're an advanced civilization exploring potentially hostile territory, you don't announce yourself with flashing lights and radio broadcasts. You observe. You learn. You remain undetected until you've assessed the situation. A probe disguised as a comet could enter a solar system, pass through unmolested, gather data, and depart without ever triggering defensive responses, if any exist. The scientific observations we have so far don't contradict this. 3I Atlas has a coma. It's shedding material. It exhibits contrived features. But it also lacks a tail, has impossible chemistry, maintains trajectory despite mass loss, and follows a path suspiciously aligned with our planetary orbits. It looks enough like a comet to pass initial scrutiny, but weird enough when examined closely to raise flags. Exactly what you'd expect from camouflage, good enough to fool a cursory glance. Suspicious under detailed analysis. Then there's the blocking phenomenon several viewers reported. Some described their remote viewing being interfered with, as if something was aware of their attention and didn't want to be observed. Others reported getting through but sensing defenses or barriers, layers of shielding or misdirection. John Dixon specifically mentioned that those inside, if there is an inside, seemed afraid of the outcome, perhaps relating to their plan. Afraid implies anticipation. Consciousness. Stakes. Things don't plan if they're not intelligent. Things don't fear outcomes if they're not aware of consequences. If you're still watching at this point, you're clearly someone who values depth over superficial coverage. This channel exists for people like you. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Comment with investigating if you're following along and want more content like this. And show your support with that like button. Every like tells YouTube that thoughtful, detailed analysis has an audience, and that encourages more creators to take complex topics seriously. The most mind-bending aspect of all this isn't whether the remote viewing is accurate. It's what it implies if even partially correct. We're not talking about a simple binary, comet or craft. We're talking about a spectrum of possibilities where biology merges with technology, where ancient and advanced aren't contradictory, where intelligence might not resemble anything in our experience, and where the object passing through our solar system might be simultaneously a probe, a seed, a message, and a test, all of those at once, fulfilling multiple purposes across timescales that dwarf human history. The remote viewers consistently described 3I Atlas as ancient, using words like artifact, relic, aged, weathered, but also high-tech, sophisticated, advanced. This suggests a civilization that achieved technological maturity millions or billions of years ago, then either transcended, collapsed, or dispersed, leaving behind probes that continue operating on missions defined so long ago that their creators might not even exist anymore. We're looking at the universe's equivalent of a message in a bottle, cast into the cosmic ocean eons past, finally washing up on our shore. And we're arguing about whether it's glass or plastic instead of opening it to read what's inside. December 2025. The month keeps appearing in visions, in remote viewing sessions, in channeled messages, in prophetic warnings from sources ranging from intelligence analysts to spiritual mediums. Not as a vague future date, but as a specific convergence point. A moment when something shifts, when timelines fork, when the probability waves that quantum mechanics describes collapse into definite outcomes. What makes December so significant? 3I Atlas reemerges from behind the sun, becoming visible again to Earth-based observers, entering the window where any activity, any deployment, any signal would be detectable. But the prophetic focus suggests more than astronomical positioning. It suggests an event, a choice, a revelation that changes everything. The Future Forecasting Group consistently encountered apocalyptic imagery when viewing December 2025. Not metaphorical destruction, but specific scenarios involving electromagnetic disruption, plasma events, atmospheric phenomena that don't fit natural weather patterns. Their viewers describe watching 3I Atlas release smaller objects at perihelion. Dozens or hundreds of probe-sized craft that accelerate toward inner planets, using the sun's gravity in reverse Oberth maneuvers, slingshotting inward at velocities conventional propulsion can't achieve. These smaller probes, according to the visions, don't impact Earth but enter the magnetosphere, the protective bubble of Earth's magnetic field. Once there, they begin interacting with the plasma environment, the charged particles trapped in radiation belts, triggering cascading reactions that manifest as aurora-like displays across the entire planet, visible even at equatorial latitudes. Beautiful at first, mesmerizing, but then the effects intensify. Electronics fail, not from direct EMP like a nuclear detonation, but from induced currents in long conductors. Power grids, communication networks, anything that spans distances. The disruption is selective, targeting infrastructure while leaving biological systems unaffected, suggesting precision rather than indiscriminate assault. The forecasters describe a fork point following this event. In one timeline branch, humanity interprets the disruption as attack and responds with fear, activating military protocols, attempting to shoot down or disable the probes, escalating toward conflict with an adversary we don't understand and can't effectively resist. This path leads to further chaos, societal breakdown as systems remain offline, resource scarcity triggering conflicts, the thin veneer of civilization cracking under stress it wasn't designed to handle. Dark Forest scenario realized. Contact equals catastrophe because we treated it as war from the moment it began. In the other timeline branch, the disruption is recognized as a communication attempt or even a gift rather than an attack. The selective nature of the electromagnetic interference, the fact that life support systems and medical equipment can be shielded while certain other networks cannot, suggests intentional discrimination. Someone or something is resetting the board, clearing away technological dependence that's become toxic, forcing a return to more local, resilient, human-scale organization. In this branch, the initial panic gives way to adaptation. Communities pulling together, old skills reviving. And when communication is restored, it's on different terms. Less centralized, less controllable, more aligned with human well-being than corporate profit. Which path manifests depends on choices made in the immediate aftermath, particularly by those with power to shape narrative and direct response. If military leaders frame it as attack, populations will follow that framing. If scientists and diplomats frame it as contact, different options open. The forecasting suggests December is when this choice crystallizes, when 3i Atlas does whatever it's going to do, and our reaction determines which future we inhabit. Make sure you're still subscribed. Drop a comment below telling me which timeline you think is more likely. And if this content has value, if it's making you see December 2025 differently, honor that with a like. We're in this together, trying to understand what might be the most important moment in human history. Some remote viewers describe not just seeing the fork, but existing in both timelines simultaneously, experiencing the dissonance of contradictory futures overlapping. They report temporal bleed, where events from December echo backward into previous months, creating precognitive awareness in sensitives who perceive the echo before the event that causes it occurs. This would explain why so many independent sources are converging on December without clear rational basis. They're perceiving effect before cause, the timeline fork casting a shadow backward through time that manifests as prophetic certainty. Charisma Magazine, a publication serving Pentecostal and charismatic Christian communities, featured articles connecting 3i Atlas to end times prophecy, the biblical scenarios describing Earth's final days before divine judgment and renewal. The parallels are striking enough that even skeptics of religious interpretation acknowledge the pattern matching. Revelation describes signs in the heavens, stars falling to Earth, cosmic disturbances that accompany the return of Christ or the final conflict between good and evil. 3i Atlas appearing in the sky, visible to all nations, exhibiting behaviors that can't be explained by natural law, fits the archetype. The end times interpretation doesn't necessarily mean literal apocalypse. In theological terms, apocalypse means revelation, unveiling, the hidden made manifest. 3i Atlas as apocalypse could mean it reveals truths that end one age and begin another, that the unveiling of extraterrestrial intelligence, or advanced human space programs, or ancient Martian connections, represents such paradigm disruption that the world after can't resemble the world before. Some prophetic voices within Christian communities describe 3i Atlas as a divine intervention vessel, technology so advanced it appears miraculous, operated by beings that fulfill angelic functions even if their origin is extraterrestrial rather than supernatural. The message allegedly received through the CERN portal, "We come in peace to gather the star seeds," aligns with biblical harvest imagery where wheat is separated from chaff, where the faithful are gathered while the corrupt system collapses. Whether you interpret this literally as a rapture-type event, or metaphorically, as consciousness evolution separating those ready for awakening from those trapped in old paradigms, the structure matches prophetic frameworks thousands of years old. The light-based orbs that remote viewers and prophetic sources describe 3i Atlas releasing serve multiple purposes in these visions. On a practical level, they're described as neutralizing certain technologies, satellites equipped with directed energy systems, nuclear launch capabilities, technologies that could threaten the object or escalate conflict beyond recovery. But on a metaphysical level, they're described as consciousness expansion tools, emitting frequencies that activate dormant DNA, stimulate pineal gland function, dissolve barriers between physical and non-physical perception. This is where hard science and esoteric spirituality blur, where claims become untestable because they involve subjective internal experiences that can't be measured by external instruments. If you're still here, still engaged with material this complex and challenging, you're exactly who this channel serves. Subscribe right now if you value this kind of deep investigation. Comment awakening if you feel like something significant is approaching. And please, use that like button. It's not vanity metrics. It's signal to the platform that serious content deserves serious reach. The starseed concept requires unpacking. In New Age and contact literature, Starseeds are souls or consciousness that incarnated on Earth from other planetary systems, choosing to experience human life to assist with Earth's evolution or to learn lessons available through physical density. They're described as feeling out of place, longing for a home they can't quite remember, drawn to stars and space with inexplicable nostalgia. If 3i Atlas is here to gather star seeds, it implies a recognition system, an ability to identify which consciousnesses are of stellar origin and which are terrestrially evolved, and an intention to either extract them, activate them, or simply acknowledge them. This sounds absurd through a materialist lens where consciousness is an epiphenomenon of brain chemistry and nothing exists beyond the physical body. But through an idealist lens, where consciousness is fundamental and physical reality emerges from it, the concepts make different sense. If consciousness can exist independent of biological substrate, then transfer between bodies, planets, even dimensional planes becomes theoretically possible. Star seeds would be consciousness that existed elsewhere, experienced life in different forms, and incarnated here for specific purposes. 3i Atlas recognizing them wouldn't require scanning DNA, but reading energetic signatures, patterns of awareness that differentiate experiential histories. Whether any of this is real or elaborate mythology doesn't change its function. These narratives give people a framework for understanding anomalous experiences, for feeling connected to the cosmos rather than isolated on Earth, for believing their lives have meaning beyond survival and reproduction. The prophecies about December, about consciousness expansion, about star seeds being gathered, they provide hope that current suffering isn't permanent, that change is coming, that corrupt systems are temporary and will be swept away by forces beyond their control. This is powerful psychologically, even if untrue empirically, because belief shapes behavior and behavior shapes outcomes. The Galactic Federation station messages, channeled through various sources, but notably through certain YouTube channels, emphasize a positive interpretation of 3i Atlas. According to these transmissions, the object is broadcasting what they call Lyran genetic codes, activational sequences that supercharge individuals carrying dormant extraterrestrial DNA or consciousness templates. Lyrans, in this cosmology, are among the oldest humanoid civilizations in our galaxy, ancestors to many current stellar cultures, including Pleiadians and possibly ancient Martians. If Lyran codes are being broadcast, it means reconnection with heritage, restoration of abilities and awareness that were suppressed or forgotten during Earth's quarantine period, where we developed in isolation from the broader galactic community. The channelers describe December as when these transmissions peak, when Earth's position relative to 3i Atlas creates optimal conditions for signal reception, and when individuals sufficiently open to the frequencies experience spontaneous upgrades in consciousness, healing of physical and psychological trauma, activation of psychic abilities, and reconnection with soul purpose. This is testable, at least individually. If thousands or millions of people report sudden transformations in December, if healing occurs at rates beyond statistical norms, if abilities manifest that weren't present before, we'll have data. But it's also unfalsifiable at a collective level because subjective experiences can't be disproven, only believed or dismissed. Are you starting to see the scope of what December might through science, prophecy, or remote viewing? The convergence on this month suggests something beyond coincidence. Keep that subscription active. Comment December if you're watching this closely, and hit that like button to show this matters. The scientific community largely dismisses the prophetic interpretations, attributing them to pattern recognition and ambiguous data, confirmation bias where believers see what they expect to see, and the psychological comfort of believing cosmic forces will intervene to solve terrestrial problems. From a skeptical perspective, 3i Atlas is just a comet, an unusual one certainly, but still bound by natural laws, following a trajectory determined by gravity and momentum, exhibiting chemistry that, while rare, isn't impossible. The water loss detected by the Swift Observatory, 40 kilograms per second, fits comet behavior. The unusual activity level at great distance from the Sun can be explained by volatile ices like carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, which sublimate at lower temperatures than water. The chemical composition, rich in carbon dioxide with traces of hydrogen cyanide and atomic nickel, while atypical, falls within the range of what primordial material from another stellar system might contain. Different stars have different compositions. Planets and comets forming around those stars reflect those differences. The trajectory, while statistically unlikely, isn't impossible. Space is vast. Billions of years have passed. Countless objects have been ejected from countless stellar systems. Eventually, one was going to pass through ours at an angle and velocity that looks suspiciously intentional. We're experiencing selection bias, noticing this one object precisely because it's unusual, while forgetting the thousands of comets and asteroids that behaved exactly as predicted. The government shutdown, the data delays, the coordinated silence from multiple space agencies all have mundane explanations rooted in bureaucracy, funding constraints, and the slow pace of peer review. Scientists don't release preliminary findings that might be wrong. Agencies don't coordinate efficiently across national boundaries. Mars orbiters were designed for surface mapping, not tracking fast-moving interstellar objects, so the imaging wasn't optimized and the results were disappointing. This is the rational framework. The one that doesn't require conspiracy, doesn't invoke ancient civilizations or dimensional portals, doesn't lean on remote viewing or prophecy. It's safer, more comfortable. It preserves the worldview where humanity is alone, where the cosmos operates on clockwork principles we can eventually understand, where threats are manageable and mysteries are just puzzles waiting for sufficient data. But is it more accurate? That's the question each person has to answer for themselves based on the evidence presented and their assessment of what constitutes proof versus possibility. Subscribe if you're willing to sit with uncomfortable questions. Comment evidence if you want me to keep presenting data without pushing conclusions. Like this video if you think others should have access to this information regardless of whether they accept it. Let's talk about what happens if 3i Atlas does something undeniably artificial when it emerges from behind the Sun in December. Releases probes, transmits signals in mathematical patterns, alters trajectory in ways that require propulsion. What would that mean for humanity? First, it would confirm we're not alone. That confirmation carries implications across every domain of human activity. Religious frameworks would need reinterpretation. Are extraterrestrials part of God's creation, fallen like humans, or something else entirely? Do souls exist across species? Does salvation apply universally, or only to Earth? Different denominations would answer differently, potentially fracturing further or finding unexpected common ground. Scientific paradigms would shift. If faster-than-light travel or communication is possible, physics needs revision. If consciousness can operate independent of biology, neuroscience needs expansion. If civilizations survive long enough to cross interstellar distances, it means the great filter lies behind rather than ahead, which is good news for our survival prospects, but raises questions about why we don't see evidence of widespread cosmic colonization. Political structures would face crisis. National sovereignty becomes quaint when faced with planetary-scale events. Who speaks for Earth? Who negotiates with visitors if negotiation is possible? The United Nations lacks enforcement power. Individual nations lack representative legitimacy. We need new frameworks developed quickly under pressure, and history shows that pressure rarely produces wise governance. Economic systems would destabilize. If visitors possess technology that makes scarcity obsolete, energy too cheap to meter, manufacturing at molecular level, information abundance beyond current capacity, then capitalism predicated on scarcity and labor value collapses. Marxism, predicated on control of production, means becomes irrelevant if production requires no labor. We'd need entirely new models for organizing society, distributing resources, finding meaning beyond material accumulation. Military establishments would face obsolescence or escalation. If the visitors are peaceful, vast defense budgets suddenly have no justification, and reallocation toward human welfare becomes politically feasible. If the visitors are hostile, conventional weapons are useless against technology that crossed light years, and our only hope involves either appeasing them, hiding from them, or developing countermeasures so rapidly that human rights become expendable in the rush. Social cohesion would test under strain. Some people would welcome contact, seeing it as humanity's graduation into a larger community. Others would resist, viewing it as invasion, corruption, or the end times. The divisions would likely correlate with existing fault lines, political, religious, cultural, but intensified beyond current tensions because the stakes involve not just policy, but species survival and identity. If you're still engaged with this material, you're demonstrating intellectual courage. This isn't easy content. It challenges everything. Make sure you're subscribed. Comment prepared if you're thinking about how you'd respond to confirmation. And use that like button to signal this deserves wider attention. The psychological impact on individuals would vary wildly. For some, confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence would trigger existential crisis. Everything they believed about human uniqueness, about Earth as the center of God's attention, about progress inevitably favoring our species, would crumble. Depression, anxiety, and breakdown would spike as meaning systems collapse faster than new ones can form. For others, confirmation would bring relief. The sense of cosmic loneliness that haunts modern secular culture would lift. We're not alone. We're not the universe's only experiment in consciousness. There are others out there, which means connection is possible, isolation is temporary, and the vastness of space doesn't equal emptiness. For a third group, confirmation would barely register emotionally. They've already internalized the probability that life exists elsewhere, so proof simply validates what they assumed. Their daily concerns, family, work, health, don't change just because governments acknowledge extraterrestrial presence. The existential becomes background noise. Which response is healthiest depends on your philosophical framework. Stoics would counsel accepting what you can't control and focusing on virtuous action regardless of cosmic context. Existentialists would emphasize creating your own meaning rather than waiting for external sources to provide it. Religious believers would search scriptures and traditions for guidance, finding interpretations that preserve faith while accommodating new realities. The remote viewing testimonies about 3I Atlas being aware of observation, about dismissive intelligence that views humans as insignificant, cuts deepest for those who invest human existence with cosmic importance. If we're just insects to something vastly more advanced, what does that mean for human dignity? For rights? For the belief that each individual matters? One response is humility. We're not the peak of evolution or the ultimate expression of consciousness. That's okay. It means there's more to learn, more to aspire toward, more complexity to appreciate. Another response is defiance. We matter because we assert that we matter, not because some external intelligence validates us. Our dignity is intrinsic, not granted. The starseed concept offers a third path. If some humans are extraterrestrial consciousness incarnated here, then dismissive attitude doesn't apply to everyone. The starseeds would be recognized as kin, and the rest of humanity would be, what? Primitives? Younger siblings? Resources? The ethical implications of dividing humanity into extraterrestrial identified and terrestrial native are catastrophic, creating a hierarchy that justifies any treatment of the lesser group. This is where positive interpretation must be interrogated carefully. Messages of peace, of gathering star seeds, of consciousness evolution sound appealing until you examine who gets elevated and who gets left behind. If 3i Atlas is selecting certain humans for contact, interaction, or extraction, the criteria matters enormously. Are they choosing based on consciousness development, genetic markers, soul origin, random chance? And what happens to those not chosen? Make sure you're still with me by subscribing. Drop a comment with questioning if you're thinking critically about these narratives. Like this video if you believe others should engage with these possibilities before December arrives. The manufactured crisis theory, the deep state scenario where 3i Atlas is used to justify authoritarian measures, gains plausibility when examining historical precedent. September 11th attacks led to Patriot Act surveillance expansion. COVID-19 pandemic led to lockdowns and mandates. In both cases, emergency powers granted temporarily became entrenched, and liberties surrendered weren't fully restored after threats diminished. If 3i Atlas exhibits obviously artificial behavior, governments could declare global emergency, implement martial law, suspend elections, nationalize resources, restrict movement, all justified as necessary for planetary defense or contact management. Once those structures exist, they resist dismantling because bureaucracies perpetuate themselves, and those with power rarely voluntarily cede it. The fact that October 1st government shutdown coincided with the optimal Mars observation window feeds this suspicion. If the shutdown was engineered to provide cover for suppressing data, it worked. NASA employees furloughed couldn't process observations. Communication offices closed couldn't answer media inquiries. By the time operations resumed, the moment had passed, and the public was left with fragments instead of comprehensive analysis. But engineering a government shutdown requires coordination across political parties that genuinely hate each other and disagree on fundamental policy. The idea that Democrats and Republicans secretly cooperate to hide extraterrestrial evidence while publicly fighting over healthcare and taxes strains credulity. It's more plausible that the shutdown was exactly what it appeared to be, partisan dysfunction, and the timing was unfortunate coincidence that conspiracy theorists retrofitted into intentional design. Occam's razor suggests the simplest explanation is usually correct. Is it simpler to believe a massive coordinated cover-up involving multiple governments, space agencies, and scientific institutions, all maintaining perfect secrecy despite thousands of participants? Or is it simpler to believe 3i Atlas is an unusual comet generating unusual data that scientists are carefully analyzing before making public statements, while bureaucratic incompetence delayed optimal observations? The answer depends on your prior beliefs about institutional trustworthiness. If you believe governments routinely lie and conspire, the cover-up narrative fits. If you believe government is mostly incompetent rather than malicious, the mundane explanation fits. Neither position is provably correct without inside information, so people choose the interpretation that aligns with their existing worldview. Stay subscribed for continued coverage as December approaches. Comment truth if you prioritize honest investigation over comfortable narratives. And please, hit that like button. It matters more than you might think for getting this content seen. The insurance industry silence deserves one more examination because it's among the strangest elements. These companies employ brilliant minds to model risk. They price policies based on sophisticated probability calculations. They adjust constantly as new data emerges. Yet an interstellar object with a Harvard astrophysicist ranking it 40% likely to be technological generates zero public response from an industry that would face catastrophic exposure if it's real and hostile. Three possibilities explain this. First, their internal analysis concludes 3i Atlas poses negligible risk, so no policy adjustments are needed. They've examined the data, consulted experts, run models, and determined the probability of significant impact is too low to factor into pricing. This is the rational explanation that doesn't require conspiracy. Second, They're adjusting policies quietly without public statements that might trigger alarm. Reinsurance rates. The insurance that insurance companies buy to cover their own exposure could be rising without retail customers seeing changes yet. Industry insiders would know but wouldn't advertise because that would undermine their business model based on projecting stability. Third, they've received guidance, formal or informal, from government sources that discussing 3I Atlas publicly isn't advisable. This doesn't require explicit conspiracy, just a conversation where regulators suggest that speculative risk assessments about unconfirmed threats could destabilize markets, and maybe it's better to wait for clearer information before acting. The companies comply because antagonizing regulators carries costs. Which explanation is correct matters because it tells us whether institutional silence reflects rational assessment or coordination to manage public perception. We won't know until December unless whistleblowers come forward or documents leak revealing internal discussions. The CERN portal story remains the wildest claim in this entire narrative. The idea that particle physicists opened a dimensional gateway and received telepathic communication from 3I Atlas occupants sounds like science fiction cosplaying as disclosure. Yet the source, Sebastian Martin identifying as a perception-based intelligence specialist, claims specific details that could be verified if anyone with CERN access was willing to investigate and speak publicly. The Large Hadron Collider does create extreme conditions. Protons accelerated to 99.9999991% light speed, carrying 6.5 trillion electron volts of energy collide, briefly generating temperatures 100,000 times hotter than the sun's core. In those collisions, particles that existed moments after the Big Bang are recreated, giving physicists glimpses of the universe's earliest instance. Some theoretical models suggest these collisions could create microscopic black holes that evaporate instantly or access extra dimensions that string theory predicts exist curled up at scales too small to observe directly. From there, speculation runs to whether these extra dimensions connect to other places, other times, other realities. Could sufficiently energetic collisions punch through dimensional barriers? Does consciousness operate in those extra dimensions, making telepathic communication a matter of tuning to the right frequency? This is where physics meets metaphysics, where testable models yield to unfalsifiable speculation. We can't prove it's impossible, but we also can't demonstrate it's real. The CERN portal story functions more as mythology than evidence, a narrative that captures imagination and connects cutting-edge science to ancient ideas about gates between worlds. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in understanding every angle. Subscribe to ensure you don't miss updates. Comment portal if you think there's anything to the CERN claims. And give that like button some love. We're building a community of people who value thorough investigation. December 19th, 2025. Mark that date. According to orbital mechanics, that's when 3I Atlas makes its closest approach to Earth, still a safe 1.8 astronomical units away, about 270 million kilometers, but close enough for optimal observation from our perspective. If the object is going to do something obviously artificial, this would be the moment. Close enough for detailed imagery, far enough to not threaten direct impact, positioned perfectly for global visibility. What should we watch for? First, trajectory changes that can't be explained by outgassing or gravitational perturbations. If 3I Atlas alters course using propulsion, physics will tell us because the acceleration profile won't match natural processes. Second, structured emissions. If radio telescopes detect signals with mathematical patterns, prime numbers, binary code, modulated frequencies that encode information, we'll know intelligence is involved. Third, probe deployment. If smaller objects separate from the main body and travel on independent trajectories toward planets or moons, that indicates purpose rather than fragmentation. Fourth, geometric transformations. If the object's shape changes in ways that suggest unfolding, reconfiguration, activation of systems, visual observation will capture it. Fifth, coordination with Earth events. If 3i Atlas does something at the exact moment that terrestrial systems experience unexplained disruptions, electromagnetic anomalies, consciousness effects reported by large populations, the correlation would be hard to dismiss. None of these would provide absolute proof without careful analysis eliminating alternative explanations, but they would shift probabilities significantly. A single anomaly could be chance. Multiple anomalies occurring simultaneously would suggest design. The question is whether we'll be allowed to observe, whether data will be released in real time or withheld for analysis, whether amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes will share findings online before official channels can curate them, whether the information environment allows rapid dissemination or whether algorithmic suppression and coordinated debunking neutralizes evidence before it spreads. This is why community matters. Why independent researchers sharing observations through decentralized networks resist control better than waiting for institutional disclosure. If something happens, we'll know because thousands of eyes are watching and hundreds are documenting. Stay subscribed to be part of that network. Comment watching if you'll be observing in December. Like this video to support independent investigation. The moral of this story, if there is one before we even know the ending, is that reality is stranger and more complex than any single framework can capture. The scientific materialist who dismisses everything outside measurable physical processes misses genuine phenomena that don't fit current models. The conspiracy theorist who sees intentional design in every coincidence misses the chaos and incompetence that explain most institutional failures. The spiritual believer who attributes everything to cosmic consciousness or divine plan misses the physical mechanisms that drive much of what we observe. Truth likely involves elements from multiple perspectives. 3i Atlas might be a comet and a craft, natural in origin but modified for purpose. It might carry no conscious occupants but operate on programming established millions of years ago. It might be perfectly explainable through physics we already understand and simultaneously open questions we haven't thought to ask. The December timeline might reflect genuine precognitive perception of a real event, or mass subconscious pattern recognition, creating shared expectation that becomes self-fulfilling, or statistical coincidence, where prophetic sources converge on the same month by chance. All could be partially true. What matters is remaining open to evidence while maintaining critical discernment. Not believing everything, but not dismissing everything either. Asking what would it take to convince me, and what would it take to disprove this for every claim encountered. Following data rather than defending positions. Updating beliefs when new information warrants rather than clinging to certainty. If you value this approach, subscribe and join others thinking carefully about complex questions. Comment discernment if you're committed to evidence-based investigation. Use that like button to show there's appetite for content that doesn't treat audiences like children who need simple answers. We're approaching the conclusion of this journey through 3i Atlas mysteries. But before we get there, I want you to do something. If you've watched this far, if this content has value to you, comment below with the phrase Atlas Rising. Let me know you made it to the end. Let me see that this community is real, that there are people who care about truth and aren't afraid of complexity. And hit that like button one more time. Show the algorithm that deep investigation matters. Show other creators that there's a market for thoughtfulness. The scientific consensus as of October 2025 is that 3i Atlas is a comet. An unusual comet from another star system with atypical chemistry and surprising activity levels, but still fundamentally a chunk of primordial ice and rock following natural laws. The majority of astronomers studying it publicly state that nothing they've observed requires invoking artificial origin. Dr. Avi Loeb, who gives it a 4 on his scale, meaning 40% chance of technological nature, represents a minority position within professional astronomy. Most colleagues consider him too willing to jump to extraterrestrial explanations, too quick to abandon conventional interpretations. His Oumuamua hypothesis, that the first interstellar visitor was an alien light sail, gained significant media attention but little support among peers who found natural explanations more parsimonious. With 3I Atlas, mainstream astronomy sees another lobe overreach. Yes, the object is interesting. Yes, some features are puzzling. But puzzling doesn't equal artificial. The universe produces natural phenomena stranger than our models predict all the time. We discovered pulsars and thought they might be alien beacons before realizing they're rotating neutron stars. We detected fast radio bursts and speculated about megastructures before finding more mundane sources. This pattern, novel astronomical observation sparks extraterrestrial speculation, then conventional explanation emerges, has played out repeatedly. Most astronomers expect 3I Atlas to follow the same arc. As more data accumulates, as models improve, the anomalies will resolve into natural, if unusual phenomena. No conspiracy is needed to explain delayed data release. No cover-up is required to explain cautious scientific statements. It's how the process works. The remote viewers, the prophets, the conspiracy theorists, they're seeing patterns that aren't there, apophenia, perceiving meaningful connections in random data. They're responding to psychological needs for mystery, for meaning, for cosmic drama that elevates mundane existence into something significant. They're creating compelling narratives that feel true because they scratch emotional itches, not because evidence supports them. This is the mainstream position, and it deserves serious consideration because mainstream science has a good track record. Most claimed anomalies do have conventional explanations. Most conspiracy theories collapse under scrutiny. Most prophetic predictions fail. The base rate for extraordinary claims proving accurate is very low, so skepticism is warranted. But skepticism cuts both ways. The same institutional science that correctly explains most phenomena has also dismissed genuine discoveries as impossible, has ridiculed researchers who were eventually vindicated, has protected paradigms beyond what evidence justified. Continental drift was rejected for decades. Helicobacter pylori causing ulcers was mocked until proven. Ball lightning was considered hallucination until documented. Science is performed by humans with career incentives, funding constraints, peer pressure, and cognitive biases. The system is designed to be self-correcting, but correction takes time, and during that time, correct minority positions suffer institutional resistance. If 3I Atlas is genuinely anomalous in ways that threaten current models, we should expect that resistance rather than immediate acceptance. So we wait. We watch. We gather data. And in December, when the object emerges from behind the sun and enters optimal observation window, we'll see whether it behaves like a comet or reveals itself as something else. Whether the prophecies manifest or fade like so many previous predictions. Whether the remote viewers were accessing genuine perception or constructing elaborate fantasy. Make sure you're subscribed because I'll be covering the December observations in detail, whatever they reveal. Comment end times or new beginning depending on which interpretation resonates. And please, one final time, hit that like button for the algorithm. This has been a long journey through complex material, and your engagement is what makes it possible. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for thinking carefully about difficult questions. Thank you for being part of a community that values investigation over indoctrination. The story of 3I Atlas isn't over. It's just beginning. And whatever December brings, we'll face it together with open minds and critical thinking. If you made it to the end, comment completed the mission. Let me know you're here. Let me see this community's strength. Subscribe for December coverage. Like this video if you think others should see it. And remember, the truth is rarely simple, but it's always worth seeking. Until next time, keep watching the skies. Keep asking questions. Keep demanding evidence. And keep believing that humanity can handle the truth, whatever that truth turns out to be. Represent. Weather.